Is His Royal Highness Prince Charles now seeing ghosts? Hi, good morning, Neil Sean here in the heart of London. That is the story breaking out of London today, well, from Kensington Gardens. Yes, we're talking about Prince Charles, His Royal Highness Prince Charles, I should say, who recently, of course, basically said that he was rather interested in ghostly matters. Let me explain a little bit more about this particular story. As we all know, Prince Charles has had a rather difficult time during his life. Apparently, he's the potty prince who talked to plants, who of course discussed climate change when it wasn't fashionable, but it is now. He's a really intelligent guy who can, of course, look into the future, not literally, but basically see what we should be looking at. These are the things that concern him. And of course, because of his position, has been able to give them a reasonable platform. But here's where it got interesting for me last week, because we were all invited, of course, along to a rather historical theatre in the very heart of Theatreland in London. And it is, of course, one of the oldest theatres in London, but more importantly, it's one of the most haunted too. Yes, we're talking about His Royal Highness Prince Charles's visit to the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, which was reopened by the current owner, Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, along with his fragrant wife, Madeline, whose brand new restaurant at the Theatre Royal is named after her. But here's where it gets interesting for me, because of course the idea of the visit was to try and encourage people back into the world of theatre after this terrible 15 months plus of pandemic. Now here's where it got particularly interesting for me, simply because of course His Royal Highness is interested in so many things, but who knew that he was that interested in ghosts? But I can tell you a story that really fascinated Prince Charles, simply because of course it's related to a lady that I got to know very well. But this particular story was passed on to me by the theatrical impresario Miss Anne Montini. Now, Joan Hind was a trumpeter. Whichever way you want to describe her, she was an incredible talent who had a successful career for many years, touring with the greats like Laurel and Hardy and many more. More latterly, of course, the once celebrated comedian Sir Ken Dodd. Now, for me, here's where it gets really interesting, simply because Joan told Anne this story. She told Anne that while going for an audition to the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane for a part in the hit musical Gypsy in the early 60s, she went along, did the audition and thought nothing more about it. She was then left to wait in one of the famous dressing rooms while the producers decided what to do. She'd definitely been offered the job, but she was just kind of waiting about for contracts, that sort of thing. What then Joan described was this, pretty much of a phenomenon. She basically said that while she was packing away her trumpet in the dressing room, she was forcibly lifted and thrown against the wall, not just once, but a couple of times. This absolutely terrified the young Joan, and basically she wanted to flee the theatre, as you would. But just as she was about to get out of the door, one of the producers came in and said, "Look, where are you going? What's happened?" All this sort of stuff. And she explained and said, "Well, this is what happened." He said, "Oh, don't worry, that's just one of many ghosts. Don't worry about that, you'll be fine." She didn't want to take that chance, so she turned down the opportunity to appear, of course, in the spectacular hit musical and film Gypsy. But, of course, Prince Charles was more fascinated himself by not just one, but around about 12 visible ghosts that are in the Theatre Royal Drury Lane currently. It remains to be seen, of course, whether Prince Charles will ever get a chance to see one up close and personal. But as Camilla said, we're all walking with ghosts, aren't we? Neil Sean in the heart of London.